All right, let me get both things over here. All right, so we are live, people. Welcome everybody. This is Syndi-Comics Weekly, and this week we have a guest with us, Mr. Chad Bowers, one of the greatest writers in the world.
Oh,
Uh,
man.
but no, but we do really appreciate you coming out and talking to us, comic geeks and nerds, and you name it, on here. Just kind of background, you've been on Syndi-Comics with us for a while, so I mean, you kind of see what we do on there. It's kind of we talk about comics, we show hauls, it brings up discussions about movies, you name it. But all it stems from is comic books. We're all been comic people for a long time. I've been in comics since '80s. And a lot of us grew up with them as kids, and we're still doing it today. So what I wanted to do, Chad, is kind of hand it over to you, let you tell us about you and what you do, especially for people who might not know who you are, and definitely kind of give them some insight in what you do.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thanks, man. I mean, I think BJ added me. I think to the group. What about I don't know 6, 7 months ago, something like that.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and I've enjoyed seeing what you guys put on the page, and I've been a comics fan, been a collector, been a comics nerd myself since I was probably about 8 years old. Uh, my first love in comics was probably GI Joe and Superman, and then that sort of like expanded into like your X-Men comics and your Teen Titans and like your team books and things like that. And then when the whole like image revolution happened, I really dug in pretty hard there as well. Um, and I've really just kind of been a fan of all things kind of comics and science fiction and really since I was a kid. I mean, I grew up in a small town, and it sounds funny, but like comics and stupid dumb sci-fi shows were kind of my outlet. And yeah, that's kind of how it works. I mean, I've got tons of comics, I got tons of toys. I'm just the idiot who got lucky enough to write some of them sometimes, and get to be involved in it that way, I guess.
Well, definitely, we're all in the same boat. BJ, of course, is in South Carolina. I'm originally from Kentucky, so
Okay.
we all understand how it is. Trying to find books. Finding
Yeah.
books in the South is a hard thing to do. If you got to go to Kroger, Food Lion, maybe a Rite Aid
I was
or
gonna
a
say the
CVS.
drugstores, yeah, because like I bought most of my first stuff at like at a place called Rexall Drugs. That was a drugstore, and then I bought a bunch of stuff at like an Eckerd Drugs, and yeah, early on, grocery stores and drugstores were like were my mile high. You know what I mean? Like yeah, that's where I went to get all my stuff. I was telling somebody earlier today that it's crazy because there's very little on newsstands now. But it's funny, Publix will carry these Marvel Digests. Have you guys seen these Marvel Digests that Publix carries now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I snatched those. I snatched those up from. I got two boys, both of them very young, and I snatch those up for those guys all the time because like they flip through my comics and read through my comics and stuff. But it's like dad stuff. So I always try to grab them something when I'm out, and those are really easy to grab. And they've done some real cool ones. They did a Thor one, they did an X-Men one, they did a Spider-Man one. So yeah, that kind of takes me back and warms my heart to see those kind of things back on the well, at least in grocery stores again. I guess that's not technically the newsstand, but you know what I mean.
yeah, it's kind of fun because remember we used to go through the racks, at Food Lion or Kroger at the grocery store, and
Yeah.
like, all right, I got to get this issue and this issue and this issue. And if it wasn't there, you didn't get it. And that means you weren't getting it either. It's like,
Oh yeah. I mean, the only reason I read Avengers West Coast is because they were out of X-Men. You know what I mean? Or they didn't get X-Men.
yeah, I
Not
remember
that
that
it's
because
bad,
I
but you
think
know what I mean.
the was most of the stories was Alex Covenant. Remember from X-Men, when all the tech anarchy took over, and that's when Generation X the first time came out. And then I remember I 3 issues of that whole crossover, and so I'm like, what happened? I never knew. It took me like 5 years before I found out what actually happened because it just
Yeah,
wasn't there.
the I think the first like big epic story that I sort of ever got all the parts to in order was the Extinction Agenda that ran through all the X-Men books. This was like in 90, maybe like 90, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I just got lucky enough to get the first part and had enough, was lucky enough to rotate in and out of the grocery stores and the drugstores to get all the parts and pieces. So that was my first like big epic storyline that I put together from beginning to end. And that thing ran for like 12, I think it was like 12 parts or something like that. It was a lot.
Oh
But
yeah, because I remember I got Fall of the New Mutants, from the
Fall
'80s.
of Mutants, yeah.
And I found them all at a thrift store. Literally, it was like the whole pack of them. They were like 50 cents each. But it's been like 4 years since it came out.
Yeah.
But I was so excited to get the whole run because I was at that time just reading Wolverine, X-Men, and Batman. That was the big ones. Because I can never find New Mutants. I can never get that because it was never in the store.
Right.
Those are like specialty ones that you had to go to a certain store to find it. Hey, comic shops were within 300 miles of my radius when I was a kid.
Oh wow, yeah. Yeah, I was lucky. I had a couple that were around. I guess the furthest one away was like 35, 40 miles, something like that. And my parents were real cool. They recognized that I was into it pretty early on, so they would make that trip at least once a month, and I would go up there and kind of fill in holes that way. And then when I was about 13 or 14, this guy that my folks went to church with, he had just opened up like a baseball card shop, but this is when the comics boom sort of hit, and he was going to he started carrying comics, and he just knew enough to know that he needed to carry comics if he wanted to keep the doors open.
Hmm.
But he didn't know a whole lot about them, so he brought me on as like a 13-year-old kid to kind of like walk him through the process of like telling him what was cool. And so I remember like being there with a red, Sharpie and a highlighter, just going through previews, circling stuff that I thought he should get. I mean, like what kind of guy lets a 13-year-old kid like pick his inventory? But I guess I did okay. He let me stay there for a couple of summers, which is pretty cool. But yeah, there was an awful lot of Valiant and Marvel 2099 in that store before I was through. But yeah, that was cool. So that was where I really got a taste of like being around comics. Before it was like a kind of a solitary thing where I kind of read them in my room or read them around the house, and I didn't have a whole lot of friends who were into comics. But that store being a big part of my like early days of comics made things a lot easier for me to sort of stick with it, and that's where I really got the bug and probably started trying to make my own comics around that same time. Because but I think around that time he was also a guy who kind of started buying art, and so I remember seeing like some of my first pages and realizing that the comics are done on like 11 by 17, not like printer
Yeah.
paper, whatever. And so that was pretty cool. And
Huh.
I remember trying to go, trying to make my own Bristol board and all kinds of weird stuff that you do when you're a kid. But anyway, that made it sort of real. I think when I was that age, actually seeing a page and holding the page, that kind of thing.
So yeah, I remember when I was a kid and I saw my first page, in a comic shop, and it was in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and it was one of the pages from Hulk 181.
Oh
And I'm looking at it, and you're right. It's a big, massive page. You put in eyes to the picture. You're like, okay, what do I do with this? And I was going to buy it. I'd saved my money as a kid, for a long time. And I got there and I'm like, all right, how much is that? And he said, that's $500. And I said, well, that's the nice picture you have in the frame as a kid. I said, I'll
yeah,
take two copies of X Factor.
I always try to remember what those pages are now. Anytime it comes up, but in my head they're always like Mark Bright Batman pages or something. But I don't think they were. I don't think they were. I think they were probably like they were definitely some '80s comic, but I can't remember what they were. Like they might have even been like Moon Knight pages or something, but not like Sienkiewicz Moon Knight pages or you know, I mean, I'm sure they were quality pages. I just can't remember what they were, to be honest with you. I wish I could. It might have been Bob Hall or somebody. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well,
But anyway, you got
and that's kind of the hard part about trying to find some artwork like that, though. I mean, that was one of our discussion topics for tonight too. I mean, art plays a big factor in what writers do, and what writers do affects the artwork. Especially
right.
in books today. So there's a lot of times a collaboration done between the two. Um, could you kind of tell us, like, hey, how does that work for you as a writer?
You mean like what my process is? Like how do I work?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it
At the full
depends.
time.
I don't know if like if your group members know exactly what I do, but I've worked on several books of Marvel. I co-wrote X-Men '92 with Chris Sims. I co-wrote and scripted Deadpool Bad Blood with Chris and Rob Liefeld. I've done some Guardians of the Galaxy stuff. I have done some Nick Fury stuff. I'm currently working on a Darkhawk miniseries that's part of Infinity Countdown. Um, I've done I guess 3 series over at Dynamite. Just a lot of different stuff. I'm working on, and I write Youngblood over at Image, where in fact I'm working on number 13 tonight, um, and just trying to put some finishing touches on that issue, which will be out probably in about 4 months. But long story short, it's basically what you hear most guys say. With me, I'm kind of a plot first kind of guy, so I got to know what's going to happen on page 20 before I can really dig into the story. It's funny because my friend and co-writer Chris Sims on a lot of stuff. He's a page one, panel one. Here's what happens on panel one. Goes straight through to the end. But I'm more of like hey, I'm going to write out what the story is, then go back in and break it down. Scene by scene, then take those scenes and turn those into a couple of pages here and there, and then go back in and try to work the dialogue. So I kind of work one time through. That gets me a plot, so I know where the story is going to be for the issue. And then I'll go back through and I'll kind of break that plot out into scenes that fit within a 20-page structure on a comic or a 22-page structure, depending on who I'm working for. And then I'll go back in and take those scenes and break those scenes out in actual pages and like panels, and then kind of go back through and dialogue once I've kind of got an idea of what that is. Typically, that last step kind of those two steps go hand in hand, the breaking everything out into panels and scripting for dialogue. And from there, once I get a draft that I really like, I'll typically share that draft with an artist that I'm working with or with an editor that I'm working with, like at Marvel or Dynamite, and those guys will kind of take it from there. They'll do thumbnails. From there, they'll break those thumbnails out into bigger pages or bigger. Or if they, depending on if they draw digitally, they'll turn them into real pages there, and then it'll go to a colorist, then it'll go to a letter, then it'll come back to me, and I'll kind of do one more rewrite of kind of everything to make sure what I wrote before fits on the page, and then that's kind of it. I mean, it's a process like anything else, but for me, it starts with that story, that plot, and then, like I said, I kind of roll that around through 3 or 4 different versions before an artist even sees it. But that's how I do it.
Thanks, Jeff.
With
So,
you for aspiring writers that are out there, you showed me a book that you read every once in a while. It kind of just helps you get back into your focus and everything. Do you remember that one that you showed me? It had I think it had Neil Gaiman in it as well.
Well, there's a lot of different books that there's a lot of books on writing. Obviously, there's a lot of script writing books, and there's a lot of a lot of how-to books or whatever. Peter David's got a big one. Bendis has a pretty good one. DC's got a how to write comics. How to write comics. Essentially, it's how to write comics the DC way, but I think it's a writer's guide to writing DC comics. I think it's what it's called. It's by Denny O'Neil. But there's a lot of books, and I got a ton of them on a bookshelf over here. But at the end of the day, if it's the one you're talking about, it's a series of books by this guy named Mark Salisbury, and it's called Comics Writers on Comic Script Writing, and there's like 2 volumes that are really good. And for me, and like I said, I go back to them every once in a while, but now that I write, I guess I kind of have more of a I guess I'm in a more of a pattern than I've ever been because I'm writing, 3 or 4 books a month now. But what really helped me early on, and I think these books are out of print now, but what really helped me early on was basically this guy, Mark Salisbury, he interviews like some of the top writers in comics. So like the first volume, he interviews like, and they're very telling of the time too, right? So like it's Kevin Smith, it's Mark Miller, it's, Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman, like all your big, late 90s, early 2000s writers. And he goes through, and not only does he like interview them about the craft and like how they come up with stories and how they sort of like plot and like how they work with artists and stuff like that, but he typically always will have an example of a script in the book. So, you'll see how Neil Gaiman does a script, or you'll see how Brian Bendis does a script, you'll see how Greg Rucka does a script, versus and all the little differences that kind of go into the way they do it, and you kind of pick. And I for one kind of went in and kind of cherry picked what I liked from one guy and another guy, and not so much like for how to write, but very much like the technical side of it. How do you format a script so it's easy for an artist to read? Those kind of things. I found those books very helpful. From that perspective, very early on, because a lot of people will write a comic script to be just like a movie script, and a lot of times that doesn't. I don't find that translates very well for an artist, because it doesn't always work the same way. So
Right.
yeah, if you're an aspiring comics writer and you want to just sit down and read some good books on craft and how some of the the I feel like some of the most talented and probably some of the greatest writers in comics have done it. Those are both very good books. There's 2 of them, like I said. It's called Comics Writers on Comic Script Writing. They kind of have blue covers. One has a green cover. Then there's also a Comics Artist on Comics Art, which is good too. And then there's 2 other books that he did. One's called Comics Creators on Spider-Man, and one of them's called Comics Creators on the Fantastic Four. And they're all very good books. And they, I like the Spider-Man one and the Fantastic Four one a lot, because those writers and artists go in very detail about very specific stories that I've read, and kind of talk about how those stories came to be, and not necessarily like talk about the stories, but kind of tell behind the scenes stuff and how they work with editors and all these other things. Just very insightful stuff as far as if you're into that kind of thing. So I hope that's the one you're talking about, BJ.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, all right.
Well, and that's a huge thing. It's like, how many nerds and how many comic book kids, we all wanted to write a comic or draw a comic or be part of a comic, situation, when we were all kids. Like, I used to draw and sketch and stuff, but it sucks. Yeah, it royally sucks. Nobody's going to buy it, period. But I went the other route on the other side, in the business side. I work for CGC and CBCS, as far as the
Okay.
grading and restoration side.
Okay.
So I got to see that side of the house, the collecting side of comics, and there's very different avenues, So I can appreciate like what you guys as writer, artists, inkers, letterers do, because you're making the books that I read and I look at from a daily perspective, So it's always awesome to hear everybody's perspective on it. I do have one question about writing, though, since, of course, you're a writer. Is there a lot of competition in-house where you work at for writing stories?
Say that one more time. You broke up a little bit on that one. I'm sorry. You said, are there a lot of comics in-house?
Is there a lot of competition between writers in-house? So, like, hey, if the story comes out, vice versa.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's like anything. Yeah, I mean, there is competition, no doubt. I don't think it's like, well, it's funny because writers are different, right? Like writers and artists are they may come to comics sort of from the same place, but from a logistics standpoint, you know, a writer can usually write anywhere from, depending on how fast they are, anywhere from, you know, two to 5 books a month, or more, depending on who you are. But a writer can typically write more than 1 book a month. And to make a true living at it, some writers have to do that, you know. A lot of writers have to do that. But an artist has to usually work on 1 book, maybe 2, if they're like a Mark Bagley, or like a, you know, I think Ramita Jr. was doing it back in the day. But typically today, most of your guys are going to be doing 1 book, if not less, a month, right? So, you know, with writers, it's different, because at the end of the day, I think it's a lot easier to write than it is to draw. I know a lot of writers kind of balk at that and be like, "Oh, he's crazy for saying that," because that's not saying writing's easy. I'm just saying it's easier than sitting at a drawing table all day, because it's a lot easier to write. You know, page 2 and 3, double page spread. You know, Spider-Man swings over New York City, and I'm done, right? But somebody's got to draw that. So at the end of the day, I feel like, I keep saying at the end of the day, guys, I'm sorry, but I think when a writer's there, the perception is that most people who have a good idea for a story can write a bad script, but a good artist can make it look great, right? A good artist can make a bad story look great, but a bad artist can't necessarily make a great story look amazing. So most people don't want to hire an artist who's not quite up to par with a good story. But it doesn't always work the same way. So you've got a lot of guys out there who are writing, and so yeah, editors are getting bombarded with scripts and story ideas and all kinds of stuff. And so, you know, you want to be putting out as much quality work, or be doing something they're not seeing from other people all the time, and that's getting harder and harder to do, you know. Yeah, so a very long-winded answer to a question that really is, yes, there is competition for writer jobs. There's a lot of competition for writer jobs. There's a lot of competition in comics. I mean, I'm sure it's a, you know, dog eat dog world when it comes to letterers. I'm sure it's a dog eat dog world when it comes to dudes wanting to be editors. You know, like every position in comics has somebody that wants it, and you know that's a big thing.
Yep. Now, I'm going to bring a little bit of history into this. So, typically, what BJ and Kyle and I do, we kind of go over like some of the books and stuff that artists or writers, or you know, letters that went through, a little research and stuff you used to write. So, of course, the 803 #1. I saw that one being your first book. So correct me if I'm wrong too, because this is only as good as what the internet is, and it is the internet, you know. But
yeah,
one of the first. Go ahead, Chad.
No, 803, I think technically is the very first thing that I did that was published. I had a I think it was a 6-page story in 803 #1, and then I had like a 6 or 8-page story in 803 #3, and that was a local kind of a comics collective that I was part of for about 2 or 3 years here in Columbia, yeah, that was great. Like that more than anything, because I do not look back on those stories fondly, but more than anything, it got me in touch with people who were making comics and sort of like showed me that it could be done. And I learned a lot from it. I learned how to letter my own comics. I learned how to, you know, work with an artist, work with an editor, those kind of things. So it was cool. I think technically the first thing that I got paid for, but probably didn't get published, was this thing by a publisher called, I don't even know if they're around anymore. And this is embarrassing if they are, so I apologize, guys. But it was called Radio Comics, and it was a I think it was like a 9 or 10 page story by a local guy. It was really cool, and like he had basically plotted it and gotten a guy who was working at Cartoon Network to draw it, and it was a 10-page story with his characters, but he needed it turned around pretty quick, and he wanted me to script it for him, and he gave it to me. But when he gave me like photocopies of the pages, somehow they had gotten out of order. So when I got the comic, or when I got the pages, I was like, okay, well, let's go. And so I had about a week to script it, and I scripted it, and I turned it back into him, and he like was looking at it, and was like, what's this? This is all out of order. And I was like, well, that's the way I got the pages. And he was like, yeah. And he sat there and read through the whole thing, and he was like, man, this is awesome. We're going to keep it just like this. So like, they didn't do anything. They didn't change anything. And I was so excited because like, that's great. You know, I was like 19 or something, and I was very excited about that. And I don't think it ever got published. But anyway, that was very fun. But then later on, like probably within a month or two after that, I met the guys from 803. Funny story too about those guys from 803. One of those guys, I was working at a comic store here in town at the time, and one of I was going to a lot of shows with the comics, you know, with the shop, working shows. I mean, we were going to, you know, I went to, I think that's where I went to Emerald City the first time. I know that's where I went to Chicago a couple times. I went to Baltimore a couple times. Lots of great, like a lot of your big shows. That's how I got in as a you know, retailer guy. And one of those shows, our DC rep for the store at the time knew that I wanted to be a comics guy, knew that I was at least trying to break in. And he sort of coordinated this like lunch with Devin Grayson. If you guys know Devin Grayson.
I know who that is.
Yeah, most recently she did like she did the Power Pack Legacy one shot that came out. But she wrote Nightwing for a long time. She's great. She was fantastic. She did the Black Widow miniseries, the first Marvel Knights Black Widow miniseries. Anyway, so like there was so I went and sat with her, and we kind of talked about ideas, and she kind of pointed out one of my ideas she thought was a very strong idea, and I kind of developed that. And I came back to the store that weekend, and that Wednesday I got a call from Bob Schreck. If you guys know who Bob Schreck is,
I know who Bob Schreck is.
Yeah, he was the Batman group editor at the time. And again, I'm like 19, maybe 20 at this point. And Bob Schreck was like, hey, I was talking to Devin Grayson, and like you know, one of these stories is pretty cool. We do this Batman black and white thing in the back of Gotham Knights. If you're interested in like maybe putting together that story, you know, I'd really like to take a look at it. If you've got an artist that can maybe thumbnail it or kind of go in and give us an idea what it looks like. And I partnered with a guy here locally, and that guy got like 5 pages into that story, and the guy disappeared. He just kind of disappeared. And I, you know, at the time, all I had was like his email and a phone number. So I would call him and email him and call him and email him. And about 2 or 3 months later, like after I think Gotham Knights had been announced, like it was much further down the road because Gotham Knights had already been announced as being canceled, I think, at the time. Like they'd solicited the last issue or whatever. The guy shows back up, and I was like, hey, man, what happened? And he was like, yeah, I just wasn't feeling it, man. And I'm like, oh, ridiculous. So that was like the first time that I got really close to doing a story. So my very first Big 2 comic was almost a Batman black and white backup. And that was where I really was like, okay, like I'm that close, I got to keep going. You know what I mean? And from there, that's right after that's when I got hooked up with those guys at 803 and really committed to make sure to try to make this happen. So anyway, that's a long story about 803, but there you
go. Oh, get on.
Well, definitely. I mean, like I'm gonna be just honest. I forgot that you actually did X-Men '92 because I was actually, and the reason being is I was in the service at the time, so I didn't even read books for almost 10 years. You know, but BJ was telling me about it. But you do an X-Men '92, which to me that was your real breakthrough book. It really was what I see. You know. can you kind of give us like, hey, how did Marvel and you guys get together to make X-Men 92?
Well, yeah, sure. So I guess that story starts probably before, about a year before, where we had our first, I guess our first true published work was with Oni Press. We did a backup story in a book called Resurrection, and they liked that story a lot. And they offered us the opportunity to pitch on some stuff, and we pitched a graphic novel, and they picked it up pretty quickly. That was Downset Fight. And then from there, we talked to I don't know if you guys remember Monkey Brain Press, but it was like a digital first comics publisher. And me and Chris and Erica Henderson, who does Squirrel Girl now, we did a book for them, or we did a digital book for them called Subatomic Party Girls. And we did 3 issues of that before Erica got, offered some stuff at Marvel. But knowing that Erica got stuff offered at Marvel, we probably were on their radar a little bit too. So I know that Tom Brevoort had read Downset Fight because I talked to him about it, or at least saw that he had told somebody about it right after Emerald City Comic Con. I gave him a copy of that book there, and knowing that like they at least knew who Erica was, which means they'd seen her work on Subatomic Party Girls, and Tom had read and liked Downset Fight. I started emailing editors over there. I think I emailed Will Moss. I think I emailed like 4 or 5 guys, and Jordan White. Jordan D. White, who was working on, who works on Deadpool. He edits Star Wars. He edits Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff now. Now the new editor on X-Men stuff. Jordan reached out to me and Chris and said, hey, if you guys are going to be at San Diego Comic-Con, I'd really like to talk to you guys about something. And Chris had also been doing like an X-Men, commentary for the animated series at the time on Comics Alliance too. And it was just kind of right place, right time. And basically Jordan offered us the book. And at the time, they didn't quite really know what it was going to be. I think they knew that they had the name X-Men 92, which I think was in part sort of a, play on the whole Batman 66 thing. But we knew what it couldn't be. Like, we knew it couldn't be a direct sequel to the animated series, simply because of the way things sort of work between Fox and Marvel. Like, we knew that it couldn't quite be, because Fox Kids, I think, still owns that show, and Marvel doesn't quite own that show. And there's slight variations in the costumes, and like there's characters that were on the animated series that aren't in the comics and those kind of things. So the goal was to sort of figure out a way to make it all feel like it was thematically similar to the animated series, but legally distinct from, if you know what I mean. So that was kind of the goal. And so they had the name, and they told me and Chris to go off for about a week and come back. And so we did, and we came back with this story that we were both very, really, really proud of. And they were like, "Oh man, we love this story. The problem is, we'd like X-Men 92 to be part of Secret Wars, and Secret Wars takes place in this place called Battle World, and Battle World doesn't have, this place. It doesn't have this place. It doesn't have this place, because the story that we presented was kind of a globe-trotting kind of X-Men story. So the X-Men start off one place and sort of split up. So they went to they went to Japan, they went to the Savage Land, they went to Genosha, they went to all the places that you sort of want to see the X-Men go. And Marvel was like, this is great. Unfortunately, like we want to make sure this is tied into Secret Wars. So is there a way that you can kind of like pull back on that a little bit and still kind of keep some of the stuff you've got in here, but tweak it a little bit to that? And in about 2 days, it clicked pretty quick for me, and I was like, yeah, let's do this. And I figured out kind of how to work around it, but keep a lot of the stuff that I think they liked. And sure enough, they were really into it, and so that's where it went. I think what they liked the most about it is that, it sort of played with the meta idea that the X-Men were as popular in the world of X-Men 92 as they were in the real world of 1992. They weren't, hated and feared by the people that existed in Westchester. They were adored by the people of Westchester. They were celebrities in Westchester. They were the biggest thing. So, in our world in 1991 and 1992, you could go to the store and, the toy aisles were just covered in Toy Biz figures. Well, that's kind of the same way it was in Westchester, right? Like Toy Biz figures were everybody's favorite toy, and there were X-Men lunchboxes, and there were X-Men, Chef Boyardee cans on the grocery aisles. And so I think that's the whole thing is we sort of took the idea that, what made the X-Men popular in our world also made them popular in that world. And I think that was a pretty fun way to play it. And I think that it ended up being a great series. I really enjoyed working on that book. And it's pretty rare that somebody goes from doing a relatively well received graphic novel that certainly I'm very proud of, but to go from that to a digital comic to essentially one of the biggest titles of one of the biggest events Marvel's done in like the last decade. It was pretty cool. A little overwhelming, but it was pretty cool. And like anything, you look back on it, you're like, oh, I might have done this differently, or I might have changed that, or this worked better than this. But I think as a whole, certainly that first 4-issue miniseries, I think worked out really well. So
I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
Well, and I got to say thank you to BJ for introducing me to you, of course, first. And then introducing me actually to the comics that you wrote, because I didn't even know you wrote some of the books that you wrote. Like, literally, yeah. I've read them. Like, I've read, Bill and Ted Triumphant Return. I read that. I didn't know that was you who wrote.
I forget. I forget that we have something in that first miniseries.
Yep. And then, of course,
that's a weird little story.
Yeah, it was. Definitely.
I love the story. It's crazy.
But yeah, there's been a lot of bigger books you've done lately too. I mean, like Sword Quest, Ash versus Evil Dead versus Army of Darkness.
Yep.
The one book that kind of really was eye-opening though, and BJ had told me about was Youngblood. That you're writing now, and I'll tell you, dude, that's one of the best Youngblood stories I've read since the early '90s. They've had a lot of stuff out there, for Youngblood, Strike File, you name it. But this new series is freaking outstanding.
Thanks, man. I'm that means a lot. I appreciate you saying that. I'm super proud of it. Jim Toe has been an amazing guy to work with. He's a great co-creator. I've loved working with him. I don't know if you know, but the next issue is Jim's last issue. Number 11 is his last one. And then we're falling into, after that, sort of a real big story, sort of like what it's all been building to, kind of kicks off in number 12. So I'm like fully entrenched in Youngblood stuff right now. But thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I was a huge Youngblood fan when I was younger. And I tell people all the time, like, loved the X-Men when I was younger. Loved the X-Men. But the X-Men were, they were 25 years old. They're 30 years old when I started reading the X-Men. You know what I mean? Spider-Man was 30 years old when I started reading Spider-Man, or really getting into those comics. And so, but Youngblood and, Savage Dragon, which I think are my two favorite early Image books, I got into the ground floor on those books. You know what I mean? I was there on day one for those books. And so on some level, Youngblood felt like it was like being written to me. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I loved those. I mean, I was an avid Youngblood dude for like those first 4 or 5 years. Working real hard to track down all the issues. I was getting everything, so I got all the Rob books. Blood Strike, Brigade, Supreme, Glory, and there's just a ton of those books that were out there at the time, and I got them all and read them all and loved them when I was a kid. Growing up, I followed the Alan Moore stuff, I followed the Joe Casey stuff, and when Rob and I started working on Bad Blood together, for whatever reason, like my schedule just kind of linked up with Rob's real nicely, and Rob would like call me on like Sunday afternoons, and we would kind of talk and just kind of, generally just kind of riff on comic stuff, kind of like we're doing now. And you know, I told him about like, you know, how I, you know, coaxed my mom and dad into taking me to my first con because the store that I shopped at didn't get Youngblood, and that was the only way I could get it. And he was telling me a little bit about how at the time he was going to bring Youngblood back, and he wanted to do something else with it. And he was trying to figure out a way to, like, you know, modernize it a little bit and do all these different things with it. And he asked me what I would do with it, and he gave me about 2 or 3 days, and I came up with a concept that he really, really liked. Oddly enough, it involved like a Netflix show, like a Netflix channel that was built around. It was called the Bloodstream Network, and you know, so it was like a streaming service that just kind of like showed Youngblood shows. And so Youngblood were kind of competing with each other for ratings. You know, so Bad Rock had his show, and like, you know, Shaft had his show, and these guys were all sort of like trying to make sure that they were the, you know, the most watched Youngblood show. And while we really liked that, when Jim Toe came on the book and we started talking about it, you know, that felt like it was great, but like looking back on it from, you know, 25 years, because we were kind of at the 25th anniversary of Youngblood and Image Comics, is like, I want to make sure this feels as of the moment, but not old. Because, you know, I mean, who knows if we're going to be, you know, as excited about Netflix in 25 years as we are now. I mean, I hope so, but at the same time, it felt like I wanted to maybe kind of like modernize it a little bit more and kind of make sure it had a little more longevity. So, you know, I after talking with Jim a little bit, I kind of went back to the table and came up with the idea of the app and kind of worked from there. And while that still may have a little bit of, I don't know how that's going to hold up in 25 years, but at the end of the day, I think it's a good book, and I think it worked out pretty well for the story. And so people seem to really like it. I'm glad you do. Thanks, man. That means a lot.
No problem. Now, of course, you're like me, of course, you were an 80s, 90s kid, you know, so you were huge with the Youngblood, just like I was when it first came out in Image. Is it kind of surreal to be working with Rob Liefeld on Youngblood, and does he give you a lot of guidance and direction on the book?
I mean, yeah, it's very surreal, you know. I mean, it's like, you know, it's kind of like playing with Van Halen, or, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, what if you, you know, what's your favorite thing when you're 12 years old, and then you get to kind of like hang out with that thing, you know what I mean? It's great. Rob's a fantastic dude, man. He's been super good to me. He's very supportive of the book. You know, one of the coolest things that I've done, or one of the coolest things that I look at when I'm looking at all these comics that I do, is that pull quote on Youngblood or the Youngblood trade. You know, this is the best Youngblood's ever been quote that we've got from Rob. That means the world to me, you know. But as far as involvement goes, I mean, Rob's been real cool about letting me do whatever I want, and sort of just letting me, you know, play in that extreme, you know, studio sandbox. And there's really been very little that's sort of off limits. There's only been like once or twice where I said, hey, can I use this thing? And he was like, no, I kind of want to hold on to this or keep this where it's at. But he's very encouraging as far as that kind of stuff goes. He's like, use whatever you want to. And in fact, this next story that's coming up, the solicitation's not out for number 12 yet, but we're going to start this big new arc that's coming out. And I think the solicitation's out for 12. It's not out for 13.
Mm-hmm.
But this next arc is going to be, if you're a fan of Extreme Comics or Extreme Studios, and you know what Rob was doing in 1992 and 93 and 94 and on, it's going to be huge. It's going to be big. And yeah, he's great to work with. I can't say enough positive things about Rob. He's great. But yes, it's
That's
extreme.
awesome.
It's very surreal. Like, I still come in after talking to him on the phone and be like, hey, you tell my wife, I'm like, hey, I was on the phone with Rob Liefeld.
Oh yeah.
She's like, yeah. like I could hear you screaming upstairs. I could hear you guys, you know, yelling about comics. But anyway, so yeah, it's very cool.
All right.
That's awesome.
Did you tell us?
And I was the same way when I finally met Jim Lee, you know.
What was that? I'm sorry, I missed that part.
I was the same way when I met Jim Lee, you know. I was like,
right,
this is the dude who, you know, who built X-Men up, you know, in the 90s, you know. It's like, So it was cool when when he left, of course, left Marvel and went to Image and built up Image. And I got to meet him at a this local con for like there was maybe 120 people there. It was in like an auditorium. And he was just giving out free Image books at the time. So it was the same way. I was like, but dude, that's Jim Lee, and that's the dude who
Yeah.
created X-Men. Back pulled it out of the Savage Land and brought it back to the glorious days of X-Men. But I was like, it was the same way for me.
I know I sound biased when I say this stuff because like Rob is my boss when it comes to like stuff. Even though I don't think he thinks of himself like that, and I kind of don't think of him like that either. But at the end of the day, I mean, these are his characters, and he's gracious enough to sort of let me play with them and do these things. But I think when it's all said and done, man, looking back, like Rob's the best cheerleader for comics that comics has right now. I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who's more vocal about their love of comics and this this business and this industry and this art form than Rob. He is as good for comics in 2018 as Stan Lee was for comics, throughout the 60s and 70s. And so I feel like if nothing else, I'm lucky to be able to call Rob a friend and have him for him to have my back and just in general sort of be around that kind of positivity when it comes to making comics.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know you were going to say something, BJ. I didn't mean to cut you off earlier.
Oh, I was going to ask about an upcoming comic, but we've got a couple questions in the YouTube that some guys want to ask you there. Tech Chucker Brain Blast, awesome name. I wonder if there's opportunities Chad has to pitch his own pet projects, ideas for new books, characters, etc.
Yeah, I mean, there's about 4 or 5 things that I'd like to do. I mean, I've got tons of, I think BJ, this, but I've got tons of stuff that I'd like to do that would be like creator-owned stuff. I'm currently putting together one that I'm very excited about that I would love to put at like one of 3 different publishers that I've talked to. So we'll see what happens with those, but I'd like 2018, 2019 to sort of see me. I'd love to stay on Youngblood as long as I'm allowed to. But as far as like doing creator-owned stuff, yeah, I'd like to move into that in the next year or so. And there's about 2 or 3 things that I'm very excited about that hopefully I'll be able to talk about later on this year.
Yay.
Yeah.
And I know we had another question for you from Cincy Nerd, good friend of all of ours in the syndicate and out there. He did ask. He said, if you could write any comic for DC, which would you choose? But I'm actually going to piggyback on that too. Is if you could write any comic for DC, Marvel, or any publisher out there, what would you do?
I'm a big DC guy too. I think I mentioned earlier that Superman was sort of like one of the first things that hooked me with comics. I would love to work on Lobo at DC. But yeah, I think Lobo would be the absolute best. And then I'd love to write Green Lantern, specifically Guy Gardner, Green Lantern. Big Guy Gardner fan. I actually had around that same time that I was talking to a couple of people over DC about stuff. This is many years ago. I had put together a pitch for a Defenders-like series called the Offenders, and it was like, it was Guy Gardner, it was the Demon, it was Hitman, and it was Lobo, and so they were a team, and I thought that would have been a lot of fun to do. But yeah, so Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, Lobo. I would love to work on Superman. I know there's not a lot of overlap there as far as tastes go, but I would love to work on Superman. And Yeah, it's funny. I actually had a pitch that I was looking at a year or so ago, trying to get Young Animal to take a look at it. I can talk about it here, I'm sure, but I wanted to do like a Rex the Wonder Dog thing for Young Animal. And I wanted to like tag it as like DC's first Young Animal. Here comes Rex the Wonder Dog, that kind of thing. And make it just this weird sort of like incredible journey story about Rex the Wonder Dog sort of having to get home through time and space, the DC universe. That's a comic book that I still want to do one day. Yeah, but I mean, it's hard to say, man. It makes me sound like such a dick, I think, sometimes when I say things about Marvel books, because quite honestly, I mean, I wrote X-Men, you know what I mean? And I didn't necessarily get the right, like, the what is it, the Earth Prime, or like the 616 or whatever you want to call it these days. Like, I didn't get to write those X-Men, but God, I got to write, everything else. So it's hard to have like a dream project at Marvel when you're the guy who never thought he'd get to write the X-Men, but that's kind of your first thing. There's still a lot I'd like to do with current Nick Fury. Nick Fury Jr. There's tons of stuff I'd like to do with him. I loved working on the one shot that we did there. But I gotta tell you guys, like working on this Darkhawk book's huge, and he's the character. Darkhawk's a character that I tried to pitch on years ago. And getting to work on it now is a big thing for me. So if Marvel would let me do more Darkhawk, I'd say that'd be my dream project. I'm excited about what we're doing on that book and would like to do more. Yeah. I'd love to write the Hulk. But yeah, I really like writing about characters that just tear shit up. Like I really like that. So Lobo and the Hulk, and if it's a guy that can break something in half pretty easily, I like that. I like that a lot. Anyway, so there you go. Yeah.
So can we say Blood Wolf versus Lobo one year?
Oh man, listen. If you read Youngblood, you know I got a lot of love for the wolf, man. I listen. I would. I can't say too much, but I do like Blood Wolf, and the next arc is called the Blood War. So keep your eyes peeled if you're reading Youngblood.
Well, yeah, I'm excited for it. I mean, I got hooked on it. I bought both graphic novels as soon as BJ told me about it. So it's like, all right, went right through it. Took me like maybe 2 hours, and I read through both of them. And I was like, I would just flip and keep going because those are great, great stories too. And that's what I liked about it. I mean, that's my biggest issue with a lot of comics is that there's a lot of great art, but there's no story behind it. I like both,
Yeah.
So I see there'd be better writing and a little bit less art, in a book. That way it's a better storytelling for me. We got one more question for you. If you could pick any current artist to collaborate with on a dream project, who would it be?
Whew. That's tough, man. I've been really lucky too. I mean, got to work with Rob Liefeld. Still working with Rob Liefeld. He would have been a big one. Oh man, that's tough. Because I love so many artists, I mean, like I love so many guys. I'm trying to think of like somebody who when I just see their like art, I don't know. Because when you ask a writer about who would you like to collaborate with, like artistically, or who's an artist you want in a book, in your mind, you think somebody like, oh, I'd love to write a book for like, Frank Whiteley to draw, or I'd love to write a book for like Stuart Eminem to draw, or somebody like that. At the end of the day, but boy, there's a lot of pressure for that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, man, it would be awesome to do something with John Romita Jr. That would be awesome. So look for that. that Chad Bauer's John Romita Jr. Lobo book in 2019. No, I mean, I can't narrow it down. I mean, there's so many amazing guys that that I've already worked with, and so many fantastic creators that I've already worked with. It's hard to say. Alti was amazing on XMen 92. Jim's been really fantastic on Youngblood. Rory Coleman, who I'm working with on Kiss versus Army of Darkness, is incredible.
It's really good. Art is really good on
that. So many amazing guys, and I'm forgetting everybody. Like, Scott Kowalczyk, aka Ghost Rider X on Downset Fight and Sword Quest. I mean, just so many good guys. It's hard to, and it's embarrassing to not be able to sit here for the next 30 minutes and go through everybody and talk about each one of them individually. But they're just really great. I'll go with John Romita Jr. if I have to give an answer. But there's so many amazing guys. I'm really on this big Teen Titans kick right now too. Reading back through Teen Titans, and reading the 5 years later Legion, which BF did with Tom and Mary Bierbaum. I don't know if you guys have ever read those Legion stories, but they're great. So maybe Geffen and maybe Perez too. Those would be dudes I'd like to work with, but who wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
I like to see you work with Neal Adams.
See me work with Neal Adams?
Yep.
Oh man, that would be something.
Yeah.
Are you a Neal Adams fan?
I am. I'm a huge Neal Adams fan. I've been since the 80s. I got a lot of his little back issues from Batman, Green Lantern, you name it. But what got me into Neal was really X-Men. I got those issues he did to cover art for back in like the 50s, 60s issues like that.
Yeah, like the later, like that right before it went to I guess it was not. Well, was it right before it went to a reprint book?
Yeah, it was. It was like 56, 57.
Yeah, those Roy Thomas issues are great, man. The ones that he wrote, or the ones that Roy wrote and Neal drew, and those early parts of the Kree Skrull War are really great too that he did for Marvel. I mean, he's amazing. I don't think I'm reinventing the wheel here saying that Neal Adams is incredible, but he's amazing. He and Steranko and Chaykin and all those dudes who came out of the late 60s, early 70s are phenomenal.
You said Big Pip and Steranko.
Yeah, man. I got to tell you, that guy's amazing. He's pretty great. I got a really great Nick Fury sketch from him years ago when I was just a young guy. Again, going around with the comic store to different shows. Getting into conventions before they open the doors, just kind of walking around and talking to artists and stuff like that. I having worked in the store, I got a like this portfolio that Steranko had done, I guess in the 70s, and then there was this little digest size book that he had done that was called Marlowe. And I read it, and I guess nobody ever talked to him about that stuff. And so when I came up to him and introduced myself and talked to him about it, I honestly don't think he had anyone come up to him since that book came out and talked to him about that Marlowe digest. And he was very excited about it, and he saw that I had a sketchbook in my hand, and he basically took it out of my hand and did this great Nick Fury profile piece. And it's this really cool piece. It uses a lot of negative space and all these cool things, and it was amazing to see him come up with that concept right there. I mean, I'm sure it's a piece that he's done before, right? A lot of your guys with these quick head sketches know exactly what they're doing because they have a format or a little formula they kind of go to. But boy, it was amazing. Again, I was 18, 19 years old, and it was really cool being there watching that. So I always try to swing by his table or say hi when I go to these cons. He was at this con that I was in Greenville just 2 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, and that dude's fantastic.
Yeah, I met him. I think it was 5 years ago at SDCC. He was out there. I mean, I got him to do a Nick Fury sketch for me. 'Cause, I mean, he was a dude who built Nick Fury up. I mean, the '70s was huge. Before that, it was just Sergeant Fury and the Commandos. And a lot of people didn't know who Sergeant Fury was, but you turn him into Nick Fury, Agent of Shield. That was huge. Strange Tales. I mean, that was some big books back then that he was writing on. I loved it. I love to see him come back to comics and do work like that again.
Yeah, he had this like Star Trek poster. I was like, it's kind of this, I don't guess it was like a blacklight poster, but it sort of looked like a blacklight poster. That I'm pretty cheap when it comes to like collecting stuff. I try to be pretty frugal. I always look for a good deal. But he had like $80 on that thing, and man, I came so close that first day to just like dropping $80 on it, and I kind of regret that I didn't now because it would be a really nice piece for my new office here. But I'm sure I'll see him again. I'll grab one of those. They're a really great piece, though. Yeah.
Since it's getting a little late, I'm not sure how late you can stay up, but we'll see if maybe you could talk a little bit about your upcoming Transformers comic book you and Chris are writing.
Well, there's been a little bit of a shift on that. I can't say a whole lot about it at the moment. But I don't know if you've seen, but James Asmus is working on that book now. Not me and Chris. On that.
Oh, really?
So we moved on to some other stuff, and so James Asmus is currently writing that one. Yeah, well, look, I mean, like it was great. Like I loved working with him on that stuff, but there's a lot that goes into those Hasbro properties, and I feel like at the end of the day, James Asmus is a good fit for what they want to do with that book, and I like working with those guys, and they seem to like working with me. So I hope to have something else in the pipeline with them.
G.I. Joe.
Yeah, well, no, I can't say G.I. Joe. I can't say anything, but I do. Those guys are great. IDW is fantastic. And we'll see what happens. I am doing that. I am doing a G.I. Joe convention next weekend. In Augusta, and I did have an opportunity to write the file card for the show exclusive figure that they're doing. They're doing two versions of Cobra Commander's son Billy. One that's like in a white ninja outfit, and one that's like the Brainwave Billy Brainwave, and is now like an agent of Cobra. And so Robert Atkins, who drew the first IDW series with Chuck Dixon, did the card art for it, and I actually got to write the file card. So that was pretty awesome. That's something that's Joe related that's happened recently. That was very cool. And so yeah, like I said, fingers crossed. I mean, hopefully something happens over there that's a little bit different than Transformer stuff. And I love the Transformers. Don't get me wrong, absolutely love the Transformers, and had a blast working on what we did for that book. But at the end of the day, G.I. Joe is really where my heart is when it comes to those Hasbro properties. So you wouldn't know that from looking at my office right now, because it's like 50-50 G.I. Joe Transformers playing around. But hopefully one day I can do something over there that you guys get to read.
Well, I'm kind of sad because I wanted to see how your take on Transformers was going to go, but I understand how the whole Hasbro thing works. It's going to be a certain niche of this way for Hasbro a lot of times. I talked to Larry Hama a little bit about that before, and he said it was the same way when he was working on G.I. Joe with Marvel. It had to be a certain way. So I definitely understand that.
They're very particular about those properties, and if nothing else, it was really cool working behind the scenes to sort of see how those things are put together. And I'm not saying you'll never see the stuff that we did, but I think for this period of time, maybe me doing something else is a better place for my, I don't know, for what I'm working on. I guess it's hard to say. I mean, it's just one of those things. I don't know if you guys are fans of James or not, but he's a phenomenal creator, He did some amazing stuff on Quantum and Woody over at Valiant. He wrote a really great Gambit ongoing series, gosh, 5 or 6 years ago at Marvel. So I am very excited about what he's going to do with the character.
Cool. Now I know big book coming up is Darkhawk for Marvel.
Yeah.
I'm super excited for Darkhawk. Because especially being a '90s kid, '80s '90s kid, I read
Yeah.
all those Darkhawk books.
Yeah.
Where's my Secret Defenders at? Bring the new
Oh,
version
man.
of them out.
God.
Uh, but it looks like it's gonna be an amazing book out there. We did have one more question for you. What's your favorite city to go to a con for?
What's my favorite city to go to a con for?
Yep.
Well, I mean, like the convention that I've been to more than any other con, and probably my favorite con is Heroes Con in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's every June, and that's a pretty local show. I've gone to that show. Really, the convention that I told you that my mom and dad took me to buy my first issue of Youngblood. That was that show, and I've really been going to that show ever since. Haven't missed a year in a long time, and have really been going there as a creator for probably the last decade. And it's a great show. It's a great family show, but it's also, I mean, but it's a great art show. It's a great artist show. You know what I mean? Like, Shelton and his team, they take such good care to make sure that show doesn't lose its art focus. And it's a show where the floor is equally divided between like retailers and people just selling, cool stuff, and really just some of the best artists that you're going to find in comics. And if you ever get a chance and you can head over to the heroesonline.com website, just take a look sometime at like the level of talent that he has at that show. I mean, it's the best guys working in comics, the absolute best comics creators you'll find. And everybody wants to be at that show because it's just such a good show for creators and good show for fans. So I'd have to say definitely Heroes Con. And then, outside of that, I really like Emerald City a lot. That's a good show. That's a great show. And then, even though I didn't go this year, C2E2 is really good.
I definitely appreciate it because I can tell you, I haven't been to SDCC for the last 3 years. I'm kind of happy I haven't went because it's got such a big entertainment side of the house versus comic side of the house now, where a lot of us, that read comics don't get to, it's just being overwhelmed with so many people.
Yeah, it's funny. Like in all the time that I've done shows, I've never gone to San Diego. Never made it. Had chances and kind of been close, but just never quite made that trip. I would rather go to New York, or I'd rather go to like Emerald City on the West Coast than I would San Diego. But San Diego's a great show. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's cool stuff there. There's always stuff that I'd be interested, I'm sure, to see. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm very happy to do the shows that I'm lucky enough to be a guest at and go to. I mean, if they want to have me, San Diego Comic-Con, if you guys are listening, if you guys want me, I'm cheap. So shoot me an email.
Well, I know I definitely appreciate you being here tonight, Chad. Thank you for everything you've done for us. I know it's late for you guys there as well. So if you want to stick around, you definitely more than welcome to. I just usually go through halls of the week, what we read, what we thought was good this week. So if you want to stay on, definitely. It's been an honor to have you on our stream. I mean, literally, I might have anywhere from 10 to 20 people show up at this stream a week, but it's the people that want to be here, and I appreciate to see you tonight and listen to you.
Well, I'm probably gonna take off. I've got a script that I'm working on, and I appreciate you having me. And when this new Youngblood story arc starts, if you guys want to have me back, talk about that, I'd love to be back. And if
Definitely.
you guys want to have me back to talk about Darkhawk, I'd love to be back to talk about Darkhawk. I think Darkhawk's going to be big. I think if your fans or your community, your group wants to get in on the ground floor, some cool stuff, I would definitely pick up Darkhawk #1. That's going to be that Infinity Countdown miniseries. Cool stuff's going to happen in that book. So
Yeah, we'll definitely want to have you come back for the Infinity Countdown and the Youngblood stuff when the new arcs are coming out, because
yeah,
we all want to know what's going to happen. We all want to know what's going to happen, you know.
yeah.
So once
All right,
we
well
get close to the
let's do
release
that.
date, I'll let you know.
All right, cool, man. All right, well,
So
I'm gonna take off. You guys have a good night, and yeah, I look forward to
Cool.
talking to you guys again.
yeah, man.
Thank you so much, Chad.
All
See you
right,
at work.
have a good night, guys. Yep,
All right.
bye.
Bye.
And then there
Well,
was
that was
two.
fun.
Hey, man.
And there was two. Dude, thank you so much, man, for getting hooked up with Chad coming on tonight. I know a lot of us, you know, we're all comic fans, and it's cool for like comic fans to be able to connect with our artists and our writers, you know, out there. And I know he's a good friend of yours as well. So between him and Chris, so maybe that's something we could do one day, is have both Chad and Chris on at the same time.
That'd be a long interview right there. We'd have to probably start in like at noon on Saturday, because actually went to high school. We're Chris and I are from the same town in Sumter. Uh, and then like when I found out he was writing with us, I was like, oh yeah, I know this guy. Cool, man. Small world. But when I started working where I'm at now, Chad was one of the first guys I met there. Um, he was setting up some stuff for me, and I told him, like, I was like, hey, I'm about to go to Comic Con next week. So, oh, you're a comic book guy, and I was like, yeah. And he was like, hey, so I'm writing an X-Men book, and I was like, really? So, and then he showed me that, and when I was actually starting to be able to work with him full time, just started. We're both the same age. He started showing me some other sides of the writer side, because I was more just the artist. And I told him, like, give me like about 3 good artists or books I need to go look for right now. And the first one was Saga, and
Hmm.
just then on, I was like, I'm sold, dude. I that issue #1 was my grail to get, and I'm luckily I actually got it at Heroes Con 2 years ago, and I got it at a really damn good price. So, but yeah, it was,
Sweet.
you know. And besides that, we'd sit there, we talk about music and figures. I helped him find a six shot for $20 at a Walmart right down the road. So
Nice.
yeah, man.
Yeah, he was kind of talking about that, you know, his figure side of the house, you know, and I think that might do that the next time, is, man, hey, Chad, show us your collection of like stuff you collect, you know, kind of
Yeah,
thing. Because a lot of us do the same thing. You know, we're comic collectors, toy collectors, you know, Transformers, X-Men, you name it, we all collect a lot of stuff. But
truthfully, I think he has more GI Joes than Cincy Nerd. Just let you know. Just saying. I
He's
saw him and I was like, good Lord. So
yeah, I think I have two GI Joes, and that's it. You know, and that's Duke and Scarlet, and that's it.
I don't know what happened to all mine. I had a good bit, but they're all gone. I was able to keep my original G1 Star Wars ones though. They're still in my C3PO case in the
Okay,
closet.
I remember those.
Yeah.
Well, and so Matt was asking, like, how do we know Chad? And of course, Matt, dude, it's all because of BJ, man. BJ got him on here tonight. Like, literally, it was BJ messaged me yesterday and then said, "Do we want to have Chad?" And I said, "Yes, definitely."
Just
See what his
regular
collection. See,
day.
I told you somebody would want to see his collection.
It's not in display like your room there, Cincy, but you know he's got a full time job, and what 4 issues comics he's doing now, and 2 kids. So and
Yeah.
conventions.
He's busy. I mean, people don't get how busy some of these guys are. I mean, like I was saying, I sat down and talked to Larry Hama for 2 hours at the last SDCC. I was there with him. I was doing gradings with books, like literally it was him, me, and then I think it was Sam Keith was next to me. And we were kind of talking about the different types of books, like how they had to go through things. That's when Larry was kind of telling me, because like, dude, Larry, I loved your Wolverine run in the 80s, in the 90s. I was like, hey, can you sign this book? He said, sure, I'll sign it for you, whatever. And then he's like, but the problem is that's not the Wolverine I really wanted to do. He said there was a lot of restrictions, because of how Marvel and censorship and how a lot of things happen. I said, did that happen with your GI Joe? He said, I had Marvel and Hasbro on me when I was trying to do GI Joe. Same way with the Transformers books. That's why Simon Furman left and went to the UK, because he got more free reign in the UK than he did here. So I was like, it was interesting to see those backstories, like just like Chad was talking about tonight. Is that there is a lot of stuff that goes into it, and knowing the mechanics and the wheelhouse in the background. That's a huge thing.
Yeah, I think Hama was talking about that too on that Netflix series when they were showing what the toys made us of as well. So
Hmm.
I mean, they have to kind of protect their property too. So it's
Definitely.
understandable. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can understand too. I mean, you're talking about characters they built in the 80s, and people forget that it was like Transformers, for example. There was toys, there was the comic, and then there was the show. It wasn't
Hmm.
that way with G.I. Joe. In G.I. Joe, it was the old toys, then it was the
Yep.
show, then it was the comic. They wanted to do a comic adaptation of it. So it's kind of hard. And I remember Larry was talking about it. He was just like, dude, I'm sitting there writing, names and stuff in comics, and they're trying to put that on card backs, for toys at the same time. Because they didn't expect, the 3.75 line to get as big as it did.
Yeah.
So it's like this dude is called Dude One and Dude Two. Here's your card, which is kind of
Yeah.
funny, when Chad was talking about him writing the cards, for the con. It's just like, dude, to be a GI Joe fan and be able to write the actual cards, that is freaking sweet.
Yeah.
It's like me getting to write a Transformers biography. That would be awesome for me to build a new character. Like that.
Yeah. We were actually gonna go there because just to go, and one of the guy who runs it actually drove up to Columbia just to meet Chad at this little signing he had at a local LCS that we have, and asked him to be part of the booth. So that was pretty cool. And then I went by his house and he told me about the strike file. And, just seeing like the faces of your when your friends doing things that you love as as a kid. It just brings you back. 8-year-old guy running around cutting up the file card and put
Yep.
them in your little box and stuff like that too. So
I remember like we all had the box. You remember the little box that you used to put all the cards in? And I remember because I had one for GI Joes and I had one for Transformers where I cut all the tech specs out with the little red sheet thing. And I'm like, these are so cool. And then you lose it and you don't know what happened to them. Because we're all like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. We're like, I don't know. Like, hell, I don't remember where half of my toys went. From the then. So, but it is cool, and I'm glad to see him take off the way he has. I mean, he's done definitely a lot of great work ever since X-Men '92. So, dude, thank you so much, man, for having him come on tonight.
man, I'm glad we got it out there. So I'm glad
Cool,
he'll be able to come back up and talk some more too.
definitely. And
Yeah.
I know I talked to Ethan Van Sciver yesterday, and he's looking at June, July for us. He's got so many cons and things going on right now. So we're gonna try to get Ethan on here as well.
Oh, sweet. More the merrier.
All right. So we didn't do anything last week. So what'd you get over the last 2 weeks?
Um, they're all put up right now. Well, except for one. I posted them on the Syndi-Comics page like on the weekend since we couldn't do it. But the one I got actually on hand right now is an anniversary edition of G.I. Joe. It's actually the Marvel issue #1 inside of here. When I started reading it, I was like, okay.
IDW, yeah. My LCS didn't have that one yesterday.
Oh, I came out last week. I'm thinking about getting issue 252, but it's like a part 5 or so. I might just grab the trade of it. Because apparently Snake Eyes is a female now, which is fine.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, they killed the original off, and then they brought her in.
Oh, great. You can hang out with Cup now. Jeez.
Love IDW.
X-Men Red #3. Good old Gambit. And X-Men Blue #25. I didn't realize this was already out there. That's a really nice cover, too.
I like that one.
Yeah, it looks good. I haven't been able to read these two, but I did get to read Domino #1. And this is phenomenal. The art is amazing. The story so far is pretty good, even though it's the first one. I'm loving it. And then I hit up Second of Charles just to look around, and I actually found some good deals on some trades again. And I didn't know that there was a Jupiter's Circle book 2, but I got it. I know. I'm a huge fan of Jupiter's Circle or Jupiter's Legacy. Paper Girls, Volume 3, Brian K. Vaughan.
You finally got the third one.
Yeah.
Took you long enough.
I've never heard of this before, but it's got Brian K. Vaughan and Matt Hollingsworth, and I said, why not? We Stand on Guard.
We Stand on Guard.
Yeah. Never heard of it.
I haven't heard of that one.
But but it was $7, so I'll take it.
Anytime.
And then I found Domino.
You need to do some like a picture of like her with the book.
Yeah. Her neck is weird though.
Yeah, it's kind of long.
Yeah, like I guess you can make it look like she broke her neck in a comic book art kind of thing, yeah. But I like it. The paint apps are good. Guns need to be nothing more than purple though, but besides that.
Well, they need to be real guns, not these futuristic guns. Give me like 2 standard guns.
They're like Rob Liefeld guns.
Yeah. All right. So I got a stack. They're all screwed up though. My LCS. I'm still waiting for Ghost Rider, that Damnation issue to come in. Then the last Iron Fist still, but they did get in Ben Reilly, Scarlet Spider, finally this week. And then got Captain America #700. I'm picking up these like big milestone books because I always love milestone books like that. I got 2 copies of the Amazing Spider-Man 798. This is of course, the first appearance of Red Goblin. One to keep and one to go south to get slabbed.
Hey, Nate.
Let's see.
Your screen's not on you on the YouTube. It's just on me still.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, then you can see your comics.
All right. Well, let me just show you real fast again. All right, so we got Ben Reilly, Scarlet Spider, Captain America 700, and we got 2 copies of Amazing Spider-Man 798.
Nice.
And so if people hang out too, on the next stream, I'm giving one of those 798s away.
Spoiler.
Yep. So you got to come see us next week. Venomized #2, the regular cover. And then I got the Bagley connecting cover. I'm surprised you didn't pick this one up this week, though.
I was thinking about it.
Now, I haven't read it yet, so I'll tell you if it's good enough to read or not. But it's like I love Blink, so I was like, I got to pick it up, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good variant.
Oh yeah, I like how they did that one. Of course, Domino #1.
Yes. Did you get? Was there a variant for that?
No, they didn't get any in. They didn't order enough.
I didn't see any either.
Let's see, New Mutants. So #2, and kind of went on a little bit of a. Let's see, we got finally got this one, the Phoenix Resurrection 2 Enoch Lee cover. Had to look
Yeah.
everywhere for this thing. Ended up getting it on eBay. And then, of course, picked up some of these.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got the yellow, a pink, another pink, and a red. So luckily, I at least got the red one. I was hoping to get the green or the white one, you know, the limited edition ones. And then last thing I got was uh, Power Rangers #24. This is the Emerald City Comic Con, signed by Brian Higgins.
Cool.
And the most important thing, I got our next previews for free.
Oh yeah.
That's it. But fun, you know, as you guys, so if you guys don't know too, I do have a big book coming down the road. Um, so the guys in the Syndi-Comics chat knows which one I'm talking about from last night.
Oh yeah.
That one has already been sent off to get slabbed, so I'll probably see it in 2 months. I didn't even want to touch the book. I said just send it straight, get it slabbed, and send it to me once it's slabbed. Um, so yeah. But other than that, that is all the haul this week. Oh, and I did get Blackout from Studio Series and Grimlock from Studio Series, the
Cool.
new Transformers. Thank you, Amazon. But that's pretty much it so far. I got a bunch of boxes. I just have to unbox and stuff later. We'll see what else is in those ones. But yeah. So big thing next week. Like I said, I'm giving away 798, the first appearance of Red Goblin, to one lucky person. And what we're going to do is we're going to do play a number, and there'll be a number in my mind, and I'll show you what it is, and we'll see who wins it. And free. I'm not charging nothing for it. I mean, that's why I bought two today. I only need one, so I'll give one away. I got a slab of it coming already anyway, so. Um, but other than that, dude, BJ, thank you so much, man, for having chat on this. I know everybody enjoyed it out here. You know, it's one of those catch-22s. Like, a lot of people don't get to connect with their writers and artists and stuff. And dude, he's a friend of yours. You see him like every other day. You know, it's like and that's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you, everybody that's been on the stream today. I appreciate everybody who came by and stuck out with us. We've been on for about a little over an hour and a half. You know, pretty standard for our streams. But Brock, I don't know where you went, man. You were in here for like 2 seconds and then you were gone. And since
Yeah.
you should have jumped in here with, man. I sent you the invite. You should have been on here with me, man. I think you would have had fun too. But dude, thank you guys, really, dude. Thank you everyone that came out tonight. But yeah, Brian, you got anything else tonight, man?
Not really. I'm tired. I played a game of softball before I got here. I was on base, got 3 hits, so I'm just been old and running around. And I had fun. I can't wait for more live shows to come when Chad's able to hop on and be able to talk about the behind the scenes of I guess one of the big stories of the Marvel comics with Infinity Countdown and everything.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to see Darkhawk come back, man. It's gonna suck too. That's only gonna be a mini series, and he's gonna be gone for another 20 years.
If this artist helps it out, I think it might go. They might get in, maybe get another series going on because some of that artwork looks really, really good.
Well, and that's what kind of got me. Legacy came out. They had that issue of Darkhawk that came out, with a particular cover. I was so happy to get that. They said this is a one issue only. I'm like, you son of a bitch. I was like, do not do that. Do not play with my emotions, Darkhawk. And they killed him. And I was like, no. But yeah, we got a lot of good stuff. Next week, though, we need to talk about Damnation. We need to talk about Infinity Countdown. We need to talk about a lot of like book stuff next week with Kyle and everything. And then I know Kyle wasn't able to make it tonight too, and wanted to kind of go over his interactions and things that happened with him at C2E2 because we both know the backstory on that. But it's things that do happen at cons. So everybody's definitely come out next week. We'll talk interactions with people. We'll give a free giveaway. We're going to be talking about books, and then whatever else BJ, Kyle, Sincere, I can think of. So thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. So Brian, thank BJ. Thank you again, brother. You're awesome, dude.
Appreciate it, man. I'm always glad to be a part of this awesome group.
Same here. And Sensi, thank you for bringing us into this. We were having a blast with this. All right, guys. All right. Everyone take it easy. Have a good night. And I'll see you guys on the next video next week on this, or check out my channel, and go check out BJ has an Instagram now. So so PM him for his Instagram name. Oh, and then he's going to start posting stuff on there. And since he says he'll be here next week, since he better be here next week. And one day we need George to be here too. We need everybody here. So, all right, guys. Y'all take it easy and have a good night. We'll talk to y'all later. All right.